I guess it was on Monday before the big storm, on Facebook there was a posting going around about how to make snow ice cream. And then the days after the storm were pictures of people making this snow ice cream, which gave me an idea. So tomorrow afternoon, after the next round, because apparently we didn't get enough snow, what I've decided to do is I'm going to come over here, I'm going to bless all of the snow, and give it away as frozen holy water. I figured I'll save thousands in plowing bills. So just tell all your friends and neighbors that come tomorrow night and Tuesday, we have all this frozen holy water for them. It'll be great. I remember growing up being told, I'm not sure when it was, it's one of those phrases we've heard, but we can't remember when we first heard it. It was kind of the expression, but also kind of a rule of etiquette, and that was that at dinner time, you always avoid conversations on religion and politics. I'm sure you've heard that. Well, I've noticed, particularly as my years as a priest, and particularly when I go out to eat, that I think that's all anyone talks about when they go out to dinner. I was doing a mass with a bunch of scouts last night, and they said, well, Father, you're a priest. What else are you going to talk about? My response was, I don't go out to dinner with friends dressed like this, so the conversations are happening naturally. But everyone's talking about all of this. And the other day I was watching the installation of Bishop Coyne in Burlington, Vermont, a former professor of mine from the seminary. And at one point during the homily, he mentioned that experience of overhearing a conversation at a restaurant from the table next to him. And there was two people in their 20s. And the young woman was telling her friend that she just joined one of the mega churches in Indianapolis. And she was describing her journey to that church and explained that beforehand she had been going to a Catholic church and really wanted to make out. However, she said, it was like they mourn their religion. It was like they mourn their religion. And Bishop Coyne made the point that he understood exactly what they're talking about. I suspect all of us here have encountered that before in our lives. The Holy Father, in his document, The Joy of the Gospel, calls it living lives that seem like Lent without Easter. We've met people like that, and perhaps, unfortunately, we've joined brothers and sisters who've worshipped like that. And typically, the problem with that is it's a sign of a problem, because the characteristic of the Christian life is joy. And if joy is not what fills our lives, if joy is not what pours out from us in our interactions, it means that we're not living in relationship with the Lord, that perhaps we're merely fulfilling an obligation or trying to put forth an image to others. In that same document I just mentioned, the Holy Father wrote, "The great danger in today's world, pervaded as it is by consumerism, is desolation, an anguish born of complacent heart, the feverish pursuit of frivolous pleasures, and a blunted conscience. Whenever our interior life becomes caught up in its own interests and concerns, there is no longer room for others, no place for the poor. God's voice is no longer heard, and the quiet joy of his love is no longer felt, and the desire to do good fades." And the characteristic of this is we mourn. We mourn our religion, we mourn our jobs, we mourn our family, we mourn life itself. We're not going to get the title, "The Life of the Party," when we live this way. The Holy Father goes on to say that the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus. Those who accept his offer of salvation are set free from sin, sorrow, inner emptiness, and loneliness. With Christ, joy is constantly born anew. So the Holy Father says, I invite all Christians everywhere at this moment to a renewed personal encounter with Jesus Christ, or at least an openness to letting him encounter them. Our readings this weekend tell us how to make those first steps to this encounter, to living as people of joy. In Deuteronomy, God has promised that he would continue to send prophets to make his word known. So we'd hear not just with the ears, but we'd also hear within our hearts. And God expands this promise in John's gospel. You're in his patron church, so we got to mention John in there somewhere. In John's gospel, chapters 14, 15, and 16, the Lord tells us that God himself will be with his church to make his word known, to give us strength in our day-to-day lives, in our times of travel. Not just with his church, but God's going to dwell within each one of us. We need, as the scriptures tell us today, to listen, to hear where the Lord is present and where he is calling us to action. You may recall the story, I don't have the exact citation, I know it's in the first book of Kings, when listening for the voice of God, that God wasn't in the great and mighty acts of nature, but was found rather in the quiet. We need to take time in the chaos, in activity of life. We need to take time to be in the quiet and to listen. But we also need help to listen, to know what we're listening for. And that's why we have the church. That's why we have our families. And that's why we have our friends. And we're reminded that's not just listening. I'm sorry, I take that back. That listening is much more than just hearing. Take the demon that we hear about in the gospel reading today, who's within the man. He hears Christ. He hears his words. He hears his teaching. But it doesn't change him at all. Why? Because the demon doesn't allow the word of Christ to go anywhere beyond here. Yep, I've heard it. I can even recognize who you are. But that's fine. I don't want anything else to do with you. And so he runs from that situation. Good news is he frees the man out of the possession. Bad news is he's still a demon. The only difference between the demon and the apostles is the apostles listened with the ears of their heart. The apostles allowed that word. Sometimes it took a while to get in there, but the apostles allowed that word to transform them when they had that encounter with the Lord. It's a challenge for all of us, because sometimes we may more model the demon than the apostles in our lives. In a few minutes, we'll pray the creed together, a belief in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We'll profess a life based on the gospel. The challenge for us is to be sure that we profess that, and to profess it, we need to profess it from our heart and not just say the words. I think at times in our lives we just say the words, but that's why we need others. We need others to help us stay focused. We need others to help us listen. We need others to help us to prepare ourselves for an encounter with the Lord. The psalmist in today's psalm offers the simplest yet the best advice. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Be open to the one who speaks to you. Be open to his love. And then celebrate that encounter. Celebrate that love. Celebrate the fact that you are desired by God. Celebrate the fact that the Lord has called you by name. And celebrate the fact that the Lord is always with you.